Welcome to Soul Night Live, episode number 71. Today we'll be taking a look at the various live albums the band did over the years. My co-hosts are Henry Potts and Aymeric Leroy.
Hello.
Hey Aymeric, how are you?
Fine, thank you. Good to see you again.
It's good to see you as well. Looks like someone had a haircut since we saw him last.
Quite a radical one as well.
Yeah, did you shave the cat also?
I've had a haircut. I've been vaccinated. I'm all ready to talk about Yes albums.
Well, thank you both for dropping by. Yeah, let's go ahead and I thought we would talk about the live albums since we didn't really have a chance to get to those. You know, I've been hoping that someone would come out with a $300 box set full of redundant copies of the Union tour.
No, never gonna happen.
Never. Oh, darn it. You know, I really need 50 versions of Saving My Heart. So, Santa, if you're listening. Okay, so Yes has a long history of having live albums. I'm going to go back a little further than Yes songs because I think it's important to talk about the original lineup because they were brilliant live in a very raw and intense way. So I figure we start here with this BBC sessions because it's really the best live document. I mean, they're in the studio, but they're still playing these songs live. Best document of that early lineup. And I was curious your thoughts on this one.
Well, there's some actual live material, a bit of live material in it, I guess. There's a BBC in concert, but it's true that most of it is live in the studio or with minimal overdubs. That's right.
Okay.
We know that the band are working on, or the band and management are working on a new early years live box set, including all the BBC sessions in better audio quality than this release. So we've got that to look forward to as a release. This version of the BBC sessions, it's a weird story because the release was done by Peter Banks in the middle of a legal argument, basically with Brian Lane over royalties. So Peter Banks, off his own back, just put this release out without really other permissions, and had difficulty sourcing all of the material well. So some of the tapes are his recordings done off air. So the audio on this isn't always great. And hopefully will be better on the forthcoming release. But the playing, I mean, I love the playing. There's some fantastic performances here that capture the raw energy of the young band, I think.
Oh, absolutely. It's just a real treat to hear how they sounded and the chances they took when it came to, you know, playing these songs live. And there's a few little pieces of things that emerged on later Yes albums also included here, I believe.
Yeah, For Everyone, which is a Chris Squire song that sort of became the middle section to Starship Trooper. What else is... I think that's the main fragment that resurfaced later, because a lot of the other stuff that resurfaced was Steve Howe's Podast material.
Oh, yeah.
So it's
True.
Different thing to what we have here. But I agree that it's a unique document of the early concept of Yes when there was more spontaneity involved. And before it became a more composed and arranged form of music that didn't leave much room for that. I mean, after Peter Banks and Tony Kaye left, only pieces like Starship Trooper and Yours Is No Disgrace, I mean, stuff from the Yes album, remained as vehicles for a bit of jamming. And there's much more of that spirit in there, and it's, I think, taken for what it is. It was a great band in its own right.
You know, early on they were covering Paul Simon's America, which became maybe the most ultimate Yes cover ever. Do you think that started before Steve Howe came along? Do you think they were covering that with Peter Banks?
I don't think so, because apparently it was first rehearsed during the time when they were writing the Yes album.
Ah, okay.
Unless Henry contradicts me, I don't think they played America with Banks, did they?
Not that I can think of.
Yeah, I'm sure it would have been quite different in Peter Bag's hands anyway, because it's kind of a Steve Howard tour de force, you know.
Yeah, it's interesting that the most recent live release of it, they've split it into two parts with Howe getting a writing credit for a part. Apparently with permission from Paul Simon's publishers to recognize how it's not the Paul Simon song. There's a lot more in it.
Yeah,
But,
it really is.
the early Yes here on this album and before What's recording on this album were doing plenty of their own covers. I mean, the band begins predominantly playing covers, and there's a bunch of songs that we know they played early on, which we have no official record of, or no even bootleg record of. You know? So they played the Beatles' "I'm Only Sleeping." We know no recording of that exists. They played Eleanor Rigby, and there's one really, really lo-fi audio recording you can find online of that, which terrible audio quality, but fascinating performance. So yeah, I mean, there's almost a period of Yes before this that is lost and can never be recovered.
Well, hopefully this bit that the band is actually working on of this early stuff might provide a few gems that we haven't got a hold of yet. So
I understand it will have some material that hasn't previously been released anywhere. Quite what we'll have to see.
Excellent. Okay. Well, we'll keep our eye out for that, because that's, you know, such a special era and there's not a whole lot of this stuff. So anyway, this was really the best live document at the moment of the first Yes lineup. And moving on, it's kind of a big jump. We jump ahead a few albums, and this is mostly documented from the Close to the Edge tour, although there are a few tracks that predate it from the Fragile tour with Bill Bruford, including Perpetual Change with a drum solo, and I think maybe Long Distance Runaround.
Yeah, and yeah, it's actually two tracks that weren't played on the Close to the Edge tour. So I mean, it's a concert that could never have happened. The Yes Songs triple album. It's more than they ever played in one concert. So they took the entire set list of the Close to the Edge tour, with Starship Trooper actually was the very first performance they ever did of the song on that album, which is From the Rainbow, which accounts for the mistakes in the lyrics. It was very fresh and quite unrehearsed. But the rest, the tracks with Bruford were never played, at least at the time, with White on drums. It's pretty parallel to what happened later with Genesis on Seconds Out. They left a cinema show with Bruford because that's one track they'd stopped playing when Chester Thompson joined.
Oh, so okay. That makes sense.
Kind of thing.
Well, you know, in the back of my mind, I secretly wish for an entire show from the Fragile tour to be released someday, because the Bruford tracks here offer a tantalizing glimpse at what was, and I'd like to hear more. Now, of course, Alan does an admirable job, you know, and some of these songs I think are the definitive versions, like Siberian Catrue. I've never heard a better one. You know, just the pace and the energy of this version is easily my favorite. And I don't really feel that way about most of the other tracks. They're unique, but I probably preferred the studio ones. But also a thing with these albums is if you heard Yes songs before you heard the studio albums, you're probably always going to prefer those live versions. And if you heard the studio albums first, then you probably might prefer those.
I think that's very true. I mean, for a lot of people, this is the defining Yes album. You know, a lot of people discovered Yes through Yes songs. But I'm with you. You know, I heard the studio albums first before I got to Yes songs, when I was just digging through the band's back catalogue. And so Yours Is No Disgrace, for example, which is this very different beginning here, which is very much reflects Wakeman's style rather than Tony Kaye's style. And I just don't get on with it at all. I'm just like, no, I want the Yes album version.
Just want to jump right into it and not mess around with these kind of rockabilly kind of influences at the beginning. Yeah, it's neat, but yeah, I hear you. It's definitely different. And I think I was just a little underwhelmed with the sonic quality of this when I finally got a hold of it. I mean, it's an amazing record. It's a triple album. I mean, how often do you find those? And it has some of Roger Dean's greatest art that he did for Yes on it. But once I played it, it was like, this isn't the most, amazing sounding live album from a, an audio perspective. And a lot's been said about that over the years. What do you gentlemen think?
Well, when I first heard it, I didn't really pay a lot of attention. It was still kind of in the late vinyl era for me, so I didn't have such high demands for sound quality, and it really didn't matter. Of course, when we got the Progeny box set later on, it was interesting to see how a completely different mix could change things. But even this has its qualities. I mean, it underlines how um, powerful a live band they were, and that's the main asset of this album, I think. As a more of a Bruford fan, I mean, I find it difficult to prefer any of the versions with Alan White, but they have certainly they have a great energy behind them, and this style of drumming invented a new rhythmic language for Yes, which again is uh, taken on its own merits is quite interesting as well.
Yeah, and I mean, simply put, if there's one Yes album that you should own, this is the one. I mean, this is it really. I don't want to say it doesn't get better than this, but in some ways it doesn't. This is essential. Everything beyond this, maybe not quite as much, or to not at all. But we'll get to that in a little bit here. But yeah, I'd say this is just their legendary live album, and the three albums they did, Yes album, Fragile, and Close to the Edge, were kind of like the holy trinity of Yes. And here you get most all of the songs on them live, and that's all you get. You don't get songs from the first two albums at all. So it's kind of that era, and yeah, great
Get
stuff.
the Rick Wakeman solo showcase as well.
That's right. Yeah, he had the big showcase that he did before Roundabout,
Mm.
leading into it, which is quite a tour de force. There's nothing quite like a Rick Wakeman solo spot live. It's always a fun part of the show. Okay. So speaking of this, now with this particular box, what happened was maybe 10 years ago, someone unearthed a bunch of tapes from the Close to the Edge tour from different cities around America and maybe overseas, I don't remember, and released them all as a box. So again, you've got a bit of redundancy. But back in those days, they were more prone to improvising here and there than I think they became later. So each one of these offers a unique glimpse, so I can understand collecting them all just to see how Steve approached his soloing each night, for starters. But they also included a best of double disc, which basically gave you one version of every song that's on the box. Like they pick what they considered the best version of each. And that's what I bought. And the sound quality was night and day better than Yes Songs was. So it's kind of like a Yes Songs with a beefed up mix and some additional tracks I think that weren't on Yes Songs. Am I right about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's the source material that was used to compile Yes songs, and so in your version, the double CD, that it's basically an alternate Yes songs minus the Bruford
Right.
tool tracks, and here Henry is displaying some of the individual
I,
shows.
I happen to have it next to the computer. Yeah, this wonderful Portuguese art for each of the discs. I mean, I think it was on vinyl, wasn't it? I think they did the right thing with the material. There are fans who do want this box of everything. There are fans who just want the shows aren't that different from each other. So, other fans just want that best of. You can buy either. And then what they did with the box, is a thing of beauty. It's got some lovely Roger Dean artwork. The sound quality is great. So I think, yeah, this is the band. during its prime years.
Yeah, almost at the height of its powers, I think. And you know, what they did is something called reamping, where they basically took the isolated tracks for Chris Squire's bass, ran them into a new bass rig, beefed them up, and re-recorded them, and then put them back in the mix. So that's why the bass is so present on this, because they were able to kind of tweak it after the fact and make it meatier than it kind of was in the mix originally. And wow, what a difference it makes. And just to have a nice big fat stereo spread on these is nice too. I always felt that Yes Songs was kind of squashed down the middle a little bit. I wouldn't call it mono, but it's not the most glorious stereo I've ever heard either. So yeah, I'd say this is.
I mean, people are always going to love Yes Songs and remember it, but advances in technology are such that you've got better audio here of the Close to the Edge tool.
Yeah, I mean, so it's kind of like a glimpse at what Yes Songs could have been had they had the technology to capture it a little better.
Yeah.
Not to say that Yes Songs is terrible. I mean, it's definitely listenable. No. It's not until you get a hold of this that you realize how different it could be. So anyhow, yeah, this is a great one. And again, there's a best of out there if you are feeling timid and just want one of each song like I was. All right.
The big question is why the box they found those in didn't have the Bruford gigs from the previous tour. Why weren't they all stored in the same place if they were used to compile? So that's a bit worrying in terms of our hopes to see a whole show from the Academy of Music, which was where the Bruford tracks were recorded. And actually, I read something in an old French magazine where they said around that time, like January 72, that they were preparing an entire double live album from those concerts. So there was a plan. I mean, it's exactly, again, the same as Genesis. They had a whole album with Bruford ready, and then they decided they liked the Chester Thompson versions better. And that's probably what happened also with this. They chose as little of the Bruford era stuff because they wanted to showcase the Alan, the new drummer. So
sure, the drummer that they still have now. So it's understandable that they would probably lean towards a lineup or that has more people that are still in the band, I guess. All right. So there's a bit of a gap while Yes went into their kind of arena phase and played, you know, their sidelong epics and stuff. And this album is a pretty good showcase for that.
One of my favorite Yes covers. I've always loved the.
Yeah, I love the wintry look. I understand the bird was added after the fact. I'm not even sure if Roger Dean drew the bird, but I'm guessing he did. But originally,
it looks Deanish.
Yeah, I would think so.
I think what's significant here is that this was put together after John Anderson had left the band. So it's a Chris Squire led version of Live Yes, which comes through in the mix.
Yeah, you could definitely hear the bass better on this one.
I mean, it's been criticized for too much bass, but I never get too much bass on the Yes live album.
Yeah, I'd rather err on the side of too much than not enough.
Yeah.
And
so I really like this album. I mean, of course, the chunk of it, the biggest chunk of it is the Moraz era. I mean, it's just 2 tracks, but each of them is 20 to 30 minutes long, so it's really the majority of the album. I mean, the obvious issue with it is that the Going For The One tour in particular is not very well represented. I mean, it has 2 of the shorter tracks and not Awaken. So that's a bit of an issue. And of course, Tomato isn't really showcased as well. But I've always liked the sequencing. I mean, there's some really smart decisions made, like when it starts with Time and a Word and it goes into Going For The One, when in fact it's taken from 2 completely different tours, and Time and a Word is actually from the big medley from 78.
Exactly.
And the sequencing, the editing is really great, and I think it works fine as a whole.
Well, it is. I mean, when I first heard it, I literally thought that side 1 was how they played it live. Yeah. It wasn't until many years later when I got a hold of the big medley from the Tormato tour that I realized what it was. Like, long distance runaround is in there and some other things.
Yeah.
So yeah, they grafted it together in a really pleasant way that allowed us to hear parallels and what was the other one? Going for the One.
Going
They're
for the one.
both on there, and
The full stories as well.
yeah. But you're right about the lack of Going for the One material. This could easily have been a triple as well. If they included Awaken and Silent Wings of Freedom and maybe a couple other Tomato tracks, I think it would have been a better representation. But it's still great, and I think some of these versions are the definitive. I really think this is the greatest Gates of Delirium.
Yeah,
I think
agreed.
just the way it climaxes and lands into that da 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 part is perfect. It doesn't quite have the same oomph on the studio version. So, and I think Mraz
So
did a great job on Ritual from Tales. Unlike his version of Close to the Edge, which was a little too off script for my taste. Uh,
Yeah,
but
that's been said of quite a lot of the other material he played. I think that's the best two tracks with Moraz you could possibly have on a live album. There's been talk recently, or possibly on Henry's page. Actually, I was reading recently something I didn't know about. There were plans for a '76 live album, and they found the performance wasn't up to par, although they had the multi tracks, and that's been abandoned apparently. So I guess it's an issue. I mean, we're all dreaming of having an entire live album with Moraz, but perhaps there's just not that in the archives. I don't know.
well, I think it depends on what yes you're looking to present. I think I've heard some entire shows from that tour that were pretty darn compelling. If you could tolerate how off script he is with some of Rick's parts, then I think it's great. But if you're a stickler for that, then that might hold you back from wanting to proceed with that. Maybe.
there's a lot of great bootlegs you can find online very easily
Absolutely.
across much of their history. And the band, at least the current band, are very relaxed about people downloading bootlegs as long as money isn't changing hands. Whether there are better quality recordings, multi-tracks, somewhere in a vault somewhere is unclear. I mean, this seems to be something that the band or management or Warner, who own all the Atlantic recordings, are aware of interest in releases like this. I think Warner and management are more interested in releases like this than the band. The band themselves sometimes don't seem to get that the fans would love to hear more of this material.
Sure.
Whether more comes out, we will have to wait and see. I mean, we've had a few, the Rhino expanded releases, which I think were a great set in all, had some live material that we hadn't heard before, which was very interesting.
Well,
We know that management have been on a bit of a hunt for good recordings of historical material. Whether that will lead to anything, I don't know.
well, fingers crossed. And am I right that this album came out shortly after Drama did?
Just I don't know. What I know is that it was compiled, I think, in the summer of '79. So that's actually before John left the band. So I don't think Chris Squire's overbearing presence on it has anything to do with the breakup of the band. But he was just in charge, and he spent the whole summer, I think, making it. And it was going to come out earlier, I think.
We have a question in the chat room. What are the greatest bootlegs from 1976 you can suggest?
Jersey Stadium.
Jersey Stadium? Or was there a JFK Stadium?
If you go to yessongs.nl, there's everything.
Yeah. So the holy grail would be to find a live recording, a good quality live recording from early in the tour when they were playing Hold Out Your Hand and the solo material. But all the bootlegs that are out there, there's probably 4 or 5 of them, and they're all pretty shit.
Yeah, I've heard them and they're pretty murky sounding.
Yeah.
And I even heard a live version of South Side of the Sky minus the middle section,
Hmm.
which I think is
That's more
pretty
from
rare.
74, wasn't it?
It had Mraz on it.
Yeah.
So,
And
uh,
there's a supposedly a rehearsal version of the Remembering,
hmm,
uh, but I don't know if they ever got to play it in '76. But there's a sort of a sound check or rehearsal version that's in circulation.
it's very interesting. Yeah. So there are a few rarities that got played maybe once or twice and then dropped.
Yeah.
So, there could be a few other things lurking out there. And it's a shame that there's no, well, I guess you'd have to rely on bootlegs to hear the drama tour. There's really nothing official out there.
Well, just a few tracks, but even those on the we're going to talk about the word is live. It's a few tracks, but they're really not the best sounding, and it's quite a puzzler
y-
why there's nothing better than this from that tour.
yeah, it's like it's the most recent of all the ones we've talked about, but yet the least documented. It's almost like, I don't know, like they just couldn't get too excited or knew they were in a transitional phase and didn't want to
There's some
document.
there's some good boots, and it's an interesting tour because um, the boots from the beginning to the end of the tour are quite different, and some of the um, material they actually developed a certain amount. So Go Through This, which didn't quite make it to the album and was played live, sounds quite different by the end of the tour on those boots than at the beginning of the drama tour.
Interesting. Well, yeah, those are definitely curiosities. Okay, so moving on, the 80s is a lean decade for Yes when it comes to studio albums and live releases. I think we should talk about this first, though. This actually came out probably 15 years ago now, something like that, and
Oh,
it
4 or 5, yeah.
and it's a box set that covers from the Yes album up through Drama. Am I right?
There's even a couple of tracks from the Banks BBC sessions, Banks era. I
It
think it starts
goes
with, yeah.
it goes into Yes West, doesn't it?
Is there some 80s Yes on it as well? Okay.
Yeah, to 88, yeah.
All right.
So we hit rights issues here. So Atlantic are of the view that they own everything, every note Yes recorded from the moment Yes signed until Yes left just before Union. And so Atlantic own all of this live material, which is why you get a set like this that covers the Atlantic years and doesn't go later.
ah,
And when we get to live albums of later Yes, you start finding they're on lots of different labels, they fall in and out of print. And because we've gone past this period, which is straightforward from a rights perspective, Warner, who own Atlantic, own everything, which is great for them, makes it in a sense easy to do releases. Although, the band might be of the view that they'd rather own all of this material.
for me, I think some of the most exciting stuff on here is hearing the Yes album lineup
Yeah.
and some of the early stuff. I think there's a live version of Astral Traveler on here, and there's an early version of America with Tony Kaye,
Well, it's the last gig with Tony Kaye, actually.
Crystal
And there's
Palace.
Yeah. So,
and
yeah,
there's It's Love.
yeah, it's Love by the Rascals, with
Okay.
Squire really getting crazy towards the end. Yeah,
Yeah.
so the 71 material on that is really the best sounding and the most exciting, I think, on the entire box set. It's
Yeah.
really a live album from the 71 band, and it's within the box. It's
That alone is worth getting it
yeah.
over. And then I guess some of the drama outtakes are probably the other draw. Is there anything in
So-
between that's
Oh,
worth?
there's 76 tracks. There's Sound Chaser and Siberian Couture, I think.
Okay.
So they don't sound quite as good as the ones on the Yes Shows album, but it's still quite exciting for a Mraz era fan.
Oh yeah. Well, back in the early '90s, I managed to collect like a live version of most every song they did in the '70s, and yeah, Sound Chaser was pretty stunning, and they opened with it too. I mean, it's just There's, a lot of bands would want to warm up and save that until later in the set, but not Yes.
Yeah.
And the live versions I've heard are pretty note for note on the money.
Yeah, 75 tour in particular, I think Sound Chaser is amazing. I mean, there's a few boots, like I think there's one from California where the bass is too high in the mix, I guess. But for me, it just makes it even more exciting, and it's just completely amazing playing.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't even know if this box is still available or not, but it's worth
It
seeking out.
froze, Sean?
What's that?
Or is it me?
Oh no, are you hearing something?
We lost you there for a moment, Sean.
Yeah, we lost you there.
That's weird. I still hear you guys.
So Word of Live ends with 4 tracks from 1988, which is, I think, the only official release of 1988 live material.
No, I think there's and You and I and Heart of the Sunrise on the
Yes
91
years.
box set.
Oh, yes,
I
of
remember
course.
those
Yeah.
as not very exciting, to say the least. And so I think
Yeah,
it's better
yeah.
in this box that they're actually playing big generator
Yeah.
material, at least a couple of tracks from Big Generator, and it's a stronger representation of that band than them playing Out of the Sunrise, especially.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, 2 Big Generator pieces, 2 901-5.
Yeah.
Okay, very cool. Well, there wasn't a lot of live material. There's just basically this, which
Yeah.
is kind of a taster. I mean, it has 2 live songs. It has Changes, and it has, what's the other song?
Hold On.
Hold On, yeah, which are great. They're really great versions, but it just leaves you wishing you had an entire album of this tour rather than a couple songs.
And the solos, which are not really exciting.
It's
Yeah.
a really, really weird release. I mean, it kind of makes sense that the solos aren't otherwise available. Psy, Solly's Beard. There wasn't a release of this material.
Yeah, I'd
But
say
it doesn't really work. It's not the best. It's the least exciting bits of the concert.
pretty much, yeah, I
Put
agree. I
together.
think out of all the solo spots, Solly's Beard is the best. I think it's nice to have a live version of that because that's really a wonderful showcase for Trevor's alternate picking that's inspired by McLaughlin and Shakti and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So nice.
Whitefish is quite good, but it would work far better in the context of an entire concert rather than it being like a third of a live album or something.
Agreed. Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense.
No.
It's a crowd pleaser rather more than anything else.
True.
It does have a few interesting, like it does have a bit of, at least on the Silent Wigs of Freedom and possibly a bit of Sound Chaser as well. So it's stuff from tracks that were rarely played. So you at least get to hear a bit of them in the context of
True. It's more than the fish we got on Yes Songs. It's kind of the evolution.
And Psy and Soon just, I don't think work very well at all there.
No, not really. I mean, a bunch of keyboard pads is not my idea of a keyboard solo, but that was Tony's style in the 80s, so it's kind of expected, I guess. So we were talking a bit, you mentioned we should talk a bit about this gentleman's remixes. He is a musician in his own right and has done several albums in the last 25 years, including a recent one that's all the talk on the internet, prog boards these days. But we won't get into that because that's really not important. But talked a bit about the remixes and live extras that are part of some of the Steven Wilson.
Well, this approach of revisiting a classic album, doing a remix, having all the extras, is obviously something a lot of bands have done, and often it is Steven Wilson who a lot of prog bands have turned to. And he was given the opportunity to go back to the original tracks before the mix. So there'd been remasters before, but they'd always used the same mix, whereas Steven Wilson was able to go back a generation in tape, which also meant not just that he could perhaps mix the album slightly differently and mix them in a way that better suits a digital release, but also that there was some improvement in sound quality in places. I mean, I find the clarity in his remixes is the thing that often stands out for me more, and is more important than slight changes in what's going on in the mix.
Right. I agree with that. I think some mixes are really in part, I don't want to say impossible, but hard to improve on. I think Fragile is probably Yes's best sounding album. So I didn't really feel like he bettered that one because it was already pretty much perfect. Um,
Yeah, because
I think
Yes had one of the best producers of its time.
Yeah.
I mean, Eddie Offord in his prime, at least until. I mean, Relayer has its faults, but I mean, his work on Close to the Edge and Fragile, as you said, is hard to beat. And Close to the Edge is actually the one I would cite as an album that couldn't really be bettered by remixing. I must admit, I don't have a 5.1 setup, so I can't evaluate the merits of his 5.1 remixes. So that's probably the interest of some of those is probably in those mixes rather than in the new stereo mixes, because there wasn't that much to improve on compared.
Yeah, I mean, I think they did the releases very sensibly in that you get his new remix, you get a 5.1 mix by Wilson, you also get a straight copy of the original mix, and they even have vinyl drops as well, if you want to replicate the vinyl without owning the vinyl. So everything is on these panegyric releases.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of interesting bonus tracks as well. I mean, it varies from album to album what you get, but there's some fascinating things. There's a longer version of Adventure. There's All Fighters Past, which is a not quite complete
fragment.
Significant fragment of what's going to become the revealing science of God, with a bit of Siberian couture attached to it by the Fragile band, which is absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, it's delightful.
And it's only a shame that they didn't do more remixes, because in some cases they'd lost the tapes. So there was some initial work towards doing a going for the one release, but they don't have those original tracks to allow another Stephen Wilson remix. Although I know there was some preliminary work gathering together extras.
There was a lot of people asked that. Why did he stop? Why didn't he do Going for the One? And some people just can't believe that the tapes were lost, but it is what it is. And it would be nice to have a remix, because I always thought Going for the One had a really odd production to it, kind of very reverby and kind of murky a little bit. So it would be interesting, but it is what it is. I think out of the ones on this box, which was the Yes album through Relayer, I think Tales is the one that Stephen Wilson made sound the best. It really needed some attention. And I think this is really the definitive mix of Tales, stereo or surround. And Relayer, I think, sounds a bit better too, but I wasn't quite as impressed. Any favorites in this one for you guys?
Well, I'd go with the same as you did. And I should add also that Tales has a live version of Ritual, which is intriguing in itself, as well as being intriguing because it suggests that there's a whole pretty good sounding recording of a concert from the Tales tour in Zurich, I think. That Steve Howe did in his collection. I'm not sure we're going to see the rest of it, but it's nice to have a live version with Wakeman on it. And I agree that Relayer is also quite an improvement, although perhaps doesn't correct all the faults of the original recording, which was made in Chris Squire's brand new home studio at the time. So there's limitations, I think, due to being recorded there.
Yeah, very true. Okay, so yeah, this is worth picking up, especially if you're dying for better mixes of Tales and Relayer.
And in the context of speaking of live albums, the Yes album has a lot of live material, a lot of which is repeated from the Word is Live, but there's also a version of Perpetual Change, I think, from the US store with Tony Kaye. So there's quite a big chunk of
Very
live
nice, yeah.
material there as
And you
well.
would need to buy the surround mixes to get these bonuses. Like I have a box that's just the vinyl versions of these, and you don't get any bonuses. You just get the albums remixed with the freshened up artwork from Roger Dean. Some of which I really like, and some I don't. But they're different, except for Relayer. He didn't want to mess with perfection, I suppose, because that one's no different.
Because the artwork we're seeing here is more of a modern day Roger Dean rather than something in the spirit of
Yeah,
the
and I think that I like this
70s
one. I
work.
like that he used a variety of colors, because a lot of times he goes for this monochromatic, just green or just blue look, and those are beautiful, but this one has a little more variety, and I like that. Okay, so moving on, we'll try and get through these pretty quickly now, and we'll get to the
Yeah.
solo stuff. Um, I think it's worth noting that the live album from the ABWH tour is worth having, or the accompanying DVD, because that was a special era with Yes, and first time they played Close to the Edge in about 10 years also. So it's
But
kind of,
very unfortunately, Tony Levin was ill for this show and a couple of shows around it. And so we get Jeff Berlin on bass, which is fascinating, but he hadn't had a lot of time playing with the band. And I think what you hear on Boots and you miss on this is some of what Tony was bringing to these.
well, I miss Tony's tone because it had more of a, an aggressive edge to it. It didn't sound like Chris, but it was a heck of a lot closer to Chris's sound than Jeff Berlin,
Mhm.
who had this kind of murky jazz tone with no top end on it. Heart of the Sunrise is particularly one where it stands out. It's just like, is that fretless? It's not fretless, but it almost sounds like it. Anyway,
I mean, I mean, no criticism at all to Jeff Berlin, who is a fantastic player. He did
he's
this at short
overqualified,
notice.
honestly.
It's not going to be his best work, and it's amazing how good he is.
Yeah, and he learned the whole thing in like 2 days.
And Steve Howe, still talks about how impressed he was by Berlin coming in so well prepared.
Yeah, well, that's what you get when you get a jazz fusion thoroughbred to sub for you. Very cool. All right, and we talked about this already. I was saying that there aren't any live albums per se, but there's the video that's been circulating forever from Shoreline Amphitheater. That's a pretty good document of the show. And now, since I made this PowerPoint, they've come out with this $300 box set of countless shows from this tour.
$300 plus posters. I mean,
Right.
yeah, this new box set, it's got 30 discs, presumably because it's a 30th anniversary release. But
Oh,
it looks like it's basically a reissue of this. I mean, this is the good material on it, and then they've added lots of recordings that we don't know what the audio quality is going to be like, but I suspect they're going to be basically the Boots we've already heard.
I would think so. So they will vary in quality, but
yeah,
we have to remember it was 1991. The ability to bootleg was not nearly as good and easy as it is now. And, now you can take in a little Zoom recorder with a stereo microphone on it and probably get a better recording than you ever could have got back then.
Yeah.
So, it is what it is. But yeah, it's there. But I'd say seek out the video. That's really the draw with this tour, I think. And the versions are good. Awaken is pretty special. If you can tolerate the electric drums and the digital keyboard sounds, then this tour is one to get. It's definitely of its time, but they played great, and I think they conjured up some magic that never happened any other time. So
Yeah, it's not just about the music, it's the fact that these 8 guys were on the same stage for a tour. I mean, there was a Dallas or TV series like vibe to the whole thing. I mean, I remember watching Steve and Trevor interact because it was a sort of battle on the of the bands on stage, and I was a fan of the 70s Yes, and I wanted them to beat the 80s Yes band. There was a sort of that was one part of it as well. It wasn't just about the music being good or bad, but in the end, Awaken brought everyone together. I think in that show it was the ending piece before the encore, and that's what most people remember of it. And ultimately, it's a great musical moment.
It really is. I mean, when you look at the set list, it's pretty obvious. You know, there's not a whole lot of deep cuts or gems in there. Awaken is about as deep as it goes, which is cool. You know, I mean, it's a shame that there weren't other things. You know, there's talk of a Close to the Edge being played once, but I heard it wasn't really that good. But still, a great tour, and you know, a magical tour in hindsight. All right. So anyhow, moving on. Now we talked in our our second installment about how Keys to Ascension was a half live, half studio confection in two parts, and this one has, you know, got its share of critiques because, you know, it was taken from a show where they played three grand epics that they hadn't touched in years, and I don't know. It was. I hear that, you know, that wasn't quite as tidy as we might hope, so they went in and did a lot of post production and cleaned up the stuff that wasn't right. So what you hear with these live Keys to Ascension tracks are kind of a studio recreation more than live, and you know, I was a little
Yeah, so
disappointed when I heard that.
they weren't on tour. They planned two shows, and in the end they opened up in effect the dress rehearsal. So there were three shows you could buy tickets to. So and then they recorded these for this and a DVD as well.
Yeah,
So they
the
weren't as
DVD.
well rehearsed as they might have been.
No, but it's still a fascinating document, and just to see
Absolutely.
them play Revealing Science in America and um, Close to the Edge, you know, for the first time in
Close to the Edge is not on Volume 1 though.
you're right. No, it's on volume
Yeah,
two actually, so we'll go ahead and get to that. I
yeah.
preferred volume one. I think they put the best
Hmm.
stuff on there, and I think the rest of this was kind of the leftovers.
And I think there was far more post production actually on the first one as well.
Oh yeah, I mean it was
The live
perfect.
material on the second one is more like a faithful reflection, a
Yeah.
more faithful reflection. And I think the post production work on Volume 1 paid off because it's really a very good live album, I think, for the period.
Right. I mean, even if it is recreated after the
Yeah.
fact, you know, it's impressive to hear them play that music that well all those years later. You know, I
Mhm.
mean, just trying to uncover every lick in Revealing Science alone would be quite a chore, but it happened. So anyway, those are interesting, kind of half live, half not. And then this is an interesting document from the latter tour. And what I think is neat about this one is it's one of the first tours where they played a big chunk of their new album, which was
Yeah.
a pretty good record. You know, it had a couple little proggy epics on it and a lot of kind of proggy pop that 90s Yes is known for. Um, and there's a great DVD that goes with this as well. There's a really good Awaken on here. It's an interesting. It was a chance to see Yes kind of up close and personal in smaller venues, and
It was a strong live lineup. I think it's good that he has a good live album as a testament. And as you said, they had enough faith in the ladder to play a lot of it live, whether you like it or not. I think it's always a good sign for a band that it sort of thinks its current album is good enough to play a lot of it.
oh
And
sure. I
as
mean
you said,
that's
it hadn't happened in a while.
no. I mean they
Yes.
did that in the '70s all the time, but since then they, you know, I guess they did in the '80s as well. But yeah, it had been a while
Talk,
since
well, talk.
the
Yeah.
entire album. Obviously, they didn't play much of Union, and you know, so anyhow, I think we should mention this one, the Symphonic Live. You know, this is an actual DVD you can watch. This is the magnification tour with Tom Brislin in tow, and he's just fantastic.
Yeah.
And these are
Favorite.
really great versions of Gates and Close to the Edge
Ritual.
and Ritual. Gates and Ritual in particular.
Yeah.
It's like they never play Close to the Edge fast enough for me. It's like it's always got this kind of lethargic thing going on. Like really, the one on Yes Songs is the only one that really does it for me. But everything else on here, really nice versions. And the orchestra, this was over in Europe where they had the same orchestra with them rather than here in America, every town had a different orchestra, and that's okay. But, you get a chance to go on the road with Yes, and like in Europe, and, they really got to know that material. They were really dialed in, and just the joy of seeing these young people play this music is great.
Yeah, it's a really great album, and I would single out, as you did, Gates and Ritual as the best tracks. But I enjoy watching all of it, even that poppy little song from Magnification.
Don't go. Yeah, I don't mind.
It's I mean, the rest of the set is good enough for that to be bearable.
Yeah, and I don't mind the symphonic touches. The arrangements are really nice. It's symphonic rock anyway, so to actually just go that extra mile and have a symphony play it, that's not much of a stretch. And it didn't, sometimes orchestral renderings of rock stuff come off pretty flaccid and disappointing, but this I think worked really well. It meshed nicely.
Yeah, and as you said quite rightly, the youth of the orchestra, and also a lot of young female players as well, and they're really into it. And I think it adds a lot to the good vibe of the show. Everyone looks and sounds good. Squire looks better than quite a few years before or after that. He looks in great shape, and so I think it's great that they captured this tour in particular, which remains probably my favorite tour, Yes tour I saw, and the last time I thought they really were a great band with no reservations on my part.
Fair enough. Yeah, we are kind of moving into some other territories. Although I think the 2003 tour with Rick back in tow is almost as good as the Symphonic. And this is a fairly good document of it. It isn't the entire show, but it's most of it. And including a couple tracks from Magnification, like the title track, which I think work really well. So this is what I hoped Keys to Ascension could have been if it wasn't all doctored up after the fact in the studio. This is an actual live show without any corrections from the Tales lineup, which is really one of the greatest ones. So yeah, this is, if I was going to grab a live DVD of Yes after the 70s, this is the one I would grab first.
Yeah, well, I think the band were playing well. I think by the next year, some of the tensions in the band were getting extreme, and I think that showed in some of their live performances. But Montreux's good. Songus is pretty good.
Yeah, it's great. The Songus from 35, from 2004. Yeah, you're right. The magic wasn't quite the same. It's almost like they were getting a little tired of each other by that point, and it kind of shows. That said, what a set list. I mean, there's some great stuff played on this tour. Turn of the Century,
Mind Drive, South Side of the Sky, I think, is also on.
Oh yeah. South Side of the Sky was a standout track. That was one that everybody was begging to hear live. Yeah. When they dusted it off, everybody just loved it. And there's that great part where they stretch it out at the end, and Howe and Wakeman trade solos. Definitely a high point of this era in the live setting.
Yeah,
really beautifully done. Okay, so after this, Mr. John Anderson departs, and he's replaced by the one Benoit David, a Canadian boat upholstery man who got a lucky call one day. He didn't grow up loving Yes like some people, but it was pointed out to him that he sounded a lot like John Anderson, so he got a gig playing with a Yes tribute act, which Chris Squire saw a video of on YouTube and offered him the job. And they went out on this tour, which I believe was originally going to be called the More Drama Tour. And then eventually they just called it Yes. Because originally I think it was
That's a different thing. I mean, the
That's
More
it's
Drama
different.
tour was
Okay,
going to be in '05, and this was that tour began the year before with the band being billed as Steve Howe, Squire, and Alan White of Yes,
that's right. Yeah,
with Yes, the Yes logo quite prominent, of course. And by that time, that gig I was at actually in Lyon, they were billed as just as Yes.
okay, yeah. So
Well, I
anyhow,
think
I say the
a
draw.
good.
Go ahead.
I think this makes for a good live album. Benoit started having vocal problems, and some of his later shows, there were some boots, and he's just sounding terrible. But I thought this was a good set. Um, the set list is interesting. John Anderson having left the band, that had an impact on what they were playing. So we saw drama songs coming back in. So I thought it was good. What was it like on the night?
It was a really fine gig. I mean, it was a strange experience because it was quite recent that we had the Yes without John Anderson. But apart from that, as you point out again, it was great to hear the drama material, which wouldn't have been played had Anderson been there, and they dusted off a few old tracks like Astral Traveler, I think, is on there. So it was quite memorable night. I think I said in an earlier episode that the venue was only half full, but it was still an enthusiastic crowd. I can't quite fathom why they chose to record Lyon, or they had a French film crew, I think, filming it. Although there's only one full track that appeared as a bonus. I was lucky to be part of Yes History that night.
Yeah.
Sort of.
This comes with a nice DVD as well. It isn't the entire show. It's oddly little snippets of different songs and a couple complete songs. Thankfully, there's a complete version of Machine Messiah on here that's really the draw for me.
Yeah.
It's rendered really nicely, and yeah, that's probably my favorite part of this. It's
There were plans for a 3D version of this show with some fancy new technique with this French production company, and it's entirely unclear what happened because no full show in 2D, let alone 3D,
yeah,
ever emerged.
that would have been interesting. So anyhow, moving on. Now here we get into the era with John Davison where they started playing entire albums front to back. And for this particular one, they played all of Going for the One and the Yes album. And for me, the draw were all the songs I hadn't normally played, like a venture. I never expected to see that live, but it was really, really neat to see it in person. So these are interesting, not essential, but they each come with an accompanied DVD, so you can watch the entire show. And I thought it was fun to.
If you're playing the whole album live and broadly sticking fairly close to the album version, you then have the rather unfortunate comparison that someone can just go listen to the album version.
This is true.
The album version generally sounds better. So
it's almost more fun live than it was after the fact for me. It was fun to see it live.
yeah.
But, it's probably not the first one I would reach for when I'm listening to live stuff later. And then it had a companion, which provided Close to the Edge and Fragile. And I really like the artwork here. It looks like kind of a mountain of cauliflower off in the distance, which was kind of different for Roger. And the whole pink kind of color scheme instead of blue was refreshingly different. So that's a pretty cool one. And then after that, they stopped making DVDs and they started just putting out live albums. And probably the most notable one is the Topographic Drama tour, where they played side 1 and 4 of Topographic Oceans and all of Drama. And it was great to see
chunk of the third side as well, right?
Oh yeah, that's right. There was a bit of Leaves of Green as well, which is always nice. But it was great to see Jeff Downes play some music of his own. I mean, it's okay to see him play Rick's stuff, but at the end of the day, it's a treat to see Jeff play music that he had a hand in writing, and Drama is all about that. So
yeah, and as I said also in the previous episode, in Paris we were one of the lucky crowds to have Trevor Horn join in for Tempus Fugit, I guess. So we had almost the complete lineup. It was a bit frustrating that Chris died before this could be accomplished, but I remember seeing Billy after the gig and congratulating him for his job on especially drama, because I think he did Chris proud on that tour. Played some really great bass, and of course those are really great bass parts to begin with, but he did a fine job with them.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
All right. So anyhow, and then the 50th anniversary show from a couple years ago, kind of nice. They included a Tempus Fugit with Trevor Horn, I believe, on this, and they did No Opportunity Necessary live for the first time in decades. And I thought that was a nice addition. And I really like the artwork. It kind of almost reminds me of the ABWH cover in some ways. So
Slightly more realistic, at least in terms of color, than the previous one, I think.
Yeah, I think
at
so.
least the sea is blue and the
yeah,
the grass is green.
And then well, I guess I should mention this one. This one is a document of the tour with Rabin, Anderson, and Wakeman from a few years back, and I think it's one of the more exciting live documents of Yes music in the last 20 years.
I think it's unlistenable.
Is it because of the canned audience applause and such?
Trevor Rabin added all of this canned audience noise, you know, so you get this random audience noise popping up in the middle of songs that wasn't, you know, we have boots in the actual night, that wasn't the real audience.
Right.
It's really distracting to have this canned audience noise. Rabin has more or less apologized and said, yeah, I overdid it. I mean, I cannot listen to this album. I mean, there's some, you know, good boots from this tour. Modern recording technology is such that you know, you have good boots from most nights of a tour these days, and there's some great boots I'm very happy to listen to. I can't listen to this.
The draw for me here is Heart of the Sunrise, which is surprising because it's such a staple, but I just think it's a really bang up version. The version of Awaken is kind of different, and I'm not so sure it's totally successful. It's interesting. They've added
I guess the draw for Hearts of Sunrise for me is mostly in Rick's keyboard playing rather than Steve's guitar. So it's probably better to have a version with at least Wakeman than a version with Howe and Wakeman not being there. So that's probably accounts for it being such a successful version. I must admit I've never heard this live album, mostly on the basis of all this discussion on the crowd noise, and I thought I'd have the same reaction that Henry had actually listening to it, so I didn't really bother. And all my memories are of the actual concert I saw.
I can tune it out, but you know, I'm watching the DVD. I didn't buy the record. So anyhow, not bad. And here it is, the most recent Yes album, the Royal Affair Tour. I just wanted to include, I don't know if there's anything that's a standout track on this one.
Imagine.
But I really like the artwork. It's nice to see a night scene from Roger Dean, because he doesn't do those very often.
I think, you know, one of the things that does work well on this album is that the most of the drumming on recent Yes tours is by Jay Shellen, with Alan White just doing generally encores or a bit before the encore. And I think that the Shellen Sherwood rhythm section has a lot of energy on this album. Brings energy and pace that's missing from some of the 2000s-y live Yes albums.
I agree. Is that true with Topographic Drama as well? I feel like Jay played a big chunk of that one as well.
Yeah, I think I mean, as Aymeric was saying, I mean, Billy does Chris's drama parts fantastically. And I think Topographic Drama does have some nice energy in places.
Okay.
I think in Europe we got the the drama tour was when Alan was still the only drummer, wasn't it?
I can't remember.
Hard to say. Okay, so that wraps up the live album.